All right. Well, I'm extremely excited to have Bernie Haffey of Haffey and Company as our guest for Executive Conversations and our MedTech podcast. So, welcome today. I'm so excited to get the opportunity to talk to you and share some of your experiences and insights with our following.
Thanks, Darwin. I'm honored to be here with you today and looking forward to a robust conversation.
Absolutely. And I think I'll start out with I had the opportunity to hear you on a podcast with Jeff Pardo that was very impactful. And then the opportunity to read your book, Cutting Through. And there were so many scenarios in that book that for me were, that's right. Yeah, that's right. That really resonated with me, and aspects of it that I think I believed and thought were correct, but hadn't had them laid out in that fashion. And even in our growth as a company, trying to improve our quality management system in terms of how we bring value to candidates and companies and create best practices, there were so many aspects of that that really meant something to me, and even areas where we can then continue to improve. So maybe you could start us off. I think the one of the major things that really resonated to me, and coming from corporate America, so many companies focusing on stock value and you know financials. I was at one company. I felt like we trained our customers to take advantage of us at the end of every quarter because
Of
of the way
course.
we did things. So when you look at voice of the customer, voice of the employee, and then the financial stakeholders coming third, maybe that might be a great place for us to start.
Yeah. Well, that goes to the core management theory, and I believe you have to have a strong theory or point of view on how to lead before you can practice effectively. And I'll just tell you a little bit about how I learned about this management system and quality principles for the first time was back in 1997 at a company called Summit Technology here in Waltham, Massachusetts. And I had ascended to a vice president sales and marketing role at a West Coast company in the intraocular lens business. And I thought I was I had arrived at the leadership level uh, until I met this system and really started to learn about quality principles and practices. And what I discovered was that I was a results manager. I was a very good results manager. If the financial goal was to hit a certain number of dollars or a certain number of units, I'd find a way to get there.
Yeah.
Uh, Unintended consequences aside, very similar to what you're talking about, driving at the end of the quarter for result.
Yeah.
And what I learned in this system, and in particular about management theory, is that it starts with leading indicators of future success. Uh, and what I mean by that is employee willingness to recommend your company as a place to work in the future. That's a leading indicator. That's not a
Yeah.
lagging indicator. You ask would you be, if somebody asked you in the future, would you willingly recommend uh, this company as a place of work? And it starts there with the belief that if you measure and continually improve employee willingness to recommend, they're going to do a better job serving the customer, and you're
Right.
going to link that employee willingness to recommend to higher and higher levels of customer willingness to recommend. And if you're effective at this, in essence, your customers become part of your marketing and sales organization because they're highly willing to recommend your product or service to others. And then thirdly is the financial health of the organization, and that is purely lagging. Unless you have a process that's got some measures in it um, that have some forward aspects to them. But generally speaking, the financial health of the organization, or the shareholder, as we call shareholder branch, is the nuts and bolts. That's your revenue, your margins, your units, your stock value, whatever. All companies that I know, that are for profit, live in I would say in our terminology, a shareholder branch. If you just live in that branch and you prioritize that over these leading indicators that I just mentioned, your success will be limited, and you'll have to recreate that result again and again and again each quarter, again with a lot of unintended consequences on perhaps on the factory, on the employee, and even on the customer, despite the fact that you're hitting a number. And so what I learned in 1997 from my mentor, Dick Palermo, was the importance of having a balanced system that focuses equal weight on the voice of the employee, the voice of the customer, and thirdly, the voice of the shareholder. And by managing a balanced system like that, we were able to took a company that had a $100 million market cap in 1997 to a $1 billion sale. We created $900 million in shareholder value in about 3.5 years. And at the exit in 2000, I realized that it was the system as much, if not even more than the people. Like a good football team or hockey team or basketball team that has a great coach and a great system, they're going to win even if they maybe don't have the best players. And that was the kind of my takeaway in 2000. And since then, I've applied it in a couple other companies where I was executive VP, chief commercial officer, 2 companies that I led, all in the med tech space.
There's so many things, Bernie, that you've said that resonate. But what you talked about in terms of being results oriented, and when I started my career in sales, I wasn't a very good leader at first, and then also, I knew how to work hard, but a lot of what you just talked about, you come to certain realizations and what's better for the whole. You talk about companies that are the shareholder function. That made me think of the ivory tower echo chamber. If you don't really understand, and companies that you've been at, or scenarios where you see where people that are in leadership don't necessarily have a good feel for what's going on in the company, because I think of that type of philosophy. So I think there were several things that you said right there that really resonated.
Yeah, I think a lot of companies that I meet for the first time are living in that financial world. Their priorities are kind of over dictated by the shareholder, if you will. And I think you have to know your shareholder, and you have to know the value drivers, and you have to know the conditions in the future that would delight that key stakeholder. But you've got to have that balance. And for me, it starts with the employee willingness to recommend, having a rigorous employee survey process that looks at that as an output of maybe 10 or so variables that correlate to that willingness to recommend, and understanding, okay, against benchmarks, where are the opportunities to improve? Is it senior leadership communication? Is it cooperation between departments? Is it recognition? Is it comp, right? And understanding sort of from a Pareto standpoint, the 1 or 2 things that are going to have the most impact on that, and having a system that attacks that in a very structured way. As you know in the book, write about structured problem solving. That's a quality approach. It goes back to Deming's Plan, Do, Check, Act, which, by the way, is a descendant of the scientific method, right? Which is why we're living to 80, 90, 100 years old, and why we're flying on airplanes, millions of miles in our lives, and we have very few errors, right?
You talk about your mentor in one of the slides of my presentation, that you asked me about the other day, and I froze. I couldn't remember what it was, but it's that 93% of the failures of human versus system. scenarios is the quote that's on there, and the sports reference. Sports have always meant a lot to me, but you still have to play the game. You don't win on paper, and you look at even some of these areas where okay, you bring in better athletes or you have better talent that loses to a better system and people that work
That's right.
together and actually are on the same page versus have more talent. That happens pretty regularly.
Yep.
So I think to your point, being systems based and understanding how you bring people value and the way you focus is extremely important.
Yeah, and everybody's got to buy into the system for it to be effective. Another mentor that had a dramatic impact on my views is Bob Palmisano. He was CEO of Summit and later, in fact, just exited Wright Medical to Stryker for about $5 billion. And he was a basketball guy, and he would use an analogy where there's 10 seconds on the clock. He calls a timeout. The team's down by a point, and he draws up a play for the 5 players. And, you could think of those as 5 executives, right? And says, this is how we're going to execute the play. Darwin, you're going to set the pick. Bernie, you're going to shoot the bat. You're the shooter. And you have to say, even though you might want to be, you might think you're a better shooter and you should have the ball in your hands at that moment. The CEO is asking you to set the pick. And he said, Bob would say, look, if 4 out of 5 of you go out onto that court and execute the play in that system, and one doesn't, how likely are we going to score the winning basket versus even if you think you have a better play, or in this case, a better management system or process, that it really doesn't matter because consensus is and support for the system that you're in is critical. And so you can debate and you can discuss, kind of offline improvements to your system. But there's one CEO, there's one coach, and when that CEO coach calls a play, it's incumbent on the leadership to execute that play or execute within the system, within the management system that is agreed, and through the methods and through the common language and all of that. And when you get to that place, the company / team is exponentially more effective.
That resonates more than you know. I mean, the first thing I thought of was extreme ownership and how in that book they talk about if you're not getting what you want from leadership, don't blame leadership, look at yourself. How are you communicating it? How are you sharing what that is? And also, how open are you to being that you might be wrong? And then making sure that you share that information. But if after that information is shared and the leader decides, no, I hear you, but this is why we're going to do this, then you buy in like it was your idea. And I just got done coaching an 8th grade basketball team, which trying to get them to understand the things you can control: attitude, effort, how you focus, and everybody wants to score, but the person that makes the pass and that executes on the play and sets the pick is just as important as the person that scores, or for a lot of people, that person's never going to get the shot. They're never going to get to score. So, I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. I'm a hockey guy, so I can talk a lot about systems in hockey. But if you on the forecheck, you're pursuing the puck. There's generally 3 guys pursuing the puck in the offensive zone. You're in pursuit. What's the logic by which we're going to do that, right? What's the structure through which we're going to do that? And by logic, I mean, if the puck goes out the weak side, then what? If it goes out the strong side, then what? And in a great hockey team, there's a 1, 2, 3. 1 is the first guy on the puck. 2 is is backing them up on the strong side, and 3 is high in the slot, and then it transitions very effortlessly to from pursuit to possession, and puts you in a great place to offensively. And if you don't win the battle, you've got that third guy high, and he's going to be instantly be part of your defense, right? And so that logic, that structure, is so critical to an effective forecheck. Compare that to 3 guys going 100 miles an hour into the zone with no logic, no structure. How effective they could be, faster than the 3 guys that are playing through a system, maybe even stronger and bigger and everything else. But if they're not, if they're not hunting in a pack with an agreed set of rules, they're just not, they're not going to be as effective. So I love all these sports analogies as it applies
and
to systems.
proactivity versus reactivity. And I think you talking about, okay, calling the timeout and sharing what the play is. And even if you don't agree with it, that's not the time to determine to share your idea either. Dean Smith used to say that, hey, if you can't hit the shot wide open 60% of the time, not in the game with pressure and somebody guarding you, then you shouldn't be shooting it in the actual game. And
That's right.
As a clinician, or having worked in ER, ICU, and critical care scenarios, you have to be able to make decisions quickly, and you have to be able to do things in a reactionary setting. But it's different because you're practicing and planning and executing, practicing what to do in that scenario, and then hopefully each time you get more comfortable under that pressure. But that's the proactivity of preparing for it. And in the same way, what you're talking about, you have to practice what
Yes.
you want to be good at. And everything that you just talked about, I'm not a hockey guy, even though I actually like hockey now, because I had somebody that had me go to a game, and I actually think it's great now. Back when I was younger, I didn't. I was like, hockey? Where's the basketball
Mm-hmm.
game at, right?
Yeah,
Football.
exactly.
But again, that to me speaks of proactivity, teamwork, how you communicate, and being able to have, as you said, an objective and an understanding what the mission, the vision, and the why is that everybody buys into.
Yep.